Finally revealed, Philips Magnifier Engine can slash your electric bill by more than 70%, almost overnight. Guaranteed. My name is Darren Holman. In a couple of minutes, you'll see how I took a magnifying glass, which my kids used to fry ants on the sidewalk, and used it to power my entire home and slashed my energy bill by more than 70% in under 3 weeks. Now, I know it may be hard to believe, but this may change your mind. You're going to see how an invention developed by Philips Electronics in the 1950s, yes, the same Philips Electronics selling DVD players at Walmart, before they eventually decided to hide their breakthrough and keep it a secret, is now being used by 66,492 American families to provide them with unlimited power, all from the free and infinite energy of the sun. And they're doing it all without solar panels. But I have to warn you, by the end of this very short presentation, you may be extremely furious that you sent your precious money to the big energy fat cats or scraped the bottom of the barrel at home just to keep your lights on, when this incredible magnifier engine was out there all along, just waiting to pump out enough energy to power an entire 4-bedroom home. Inside this video, I'm going to show you exactly how you can set up this engine with dirt-cheap supplies from your local hardware store. And you won't need an engineering degree to do it. We'll get to that in a second. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about myself and why I'm able to smile as I open my utility bill every month and see a check with my name on it written from the same energy company that had robbed me blind for years. Like I said, my name is Darren Holman. I'm 62 years young, and I live about 45 minutes outside of Cleveland, Ohio, with my wife and our black Labrador, Billy. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would be able to help more than 66,000 American families get out from under the thumb of big energy, kick their energy addiction, and start generating their own power using a homemade engine from parts at their local hardware store, I would have told you to go find a good psychiatrist. But here I am, getting hundreds of letters and emails every month from people like Mike Wilson, who wrote in not too long ago to say this: "Sometimes I'll just go outside to watch my meter spin backwards, and I have to chuckle to myself knowing that someone at the energy company is going to have to write me a check this month." Or Kristen Owen, who says, "First of all, I couldn't believe that my husband was able to build this thing since he can barely screw in a light bulb. But since he did it, we've been saving around 90% on our energy bill every month. We were even able to take a 9-day cruise last month with all the extra money." Those are just a couple of the emails I get every month from families who were fed up with living under the billionaire energy snob's reign of terror, and who are thrilled to have finally taken control of their energy. In case you can't tell, I'm passionate about this, and there's a very good reason why. So let me quickly tell you about my wife, how I lost our life savings and almost ended up on the street, and how this seeming disaster led me to accidentally discovering an invention that would change my life and the lives of 66,492 other Americans. 3 years ago, I was getting ready to retire early, thanks to my wife Catherine and I investing our money wisely. But exactly 43 days after I retired, the investment company that had all of our savings was shut down by the FBI for fraud. In just one day, we lost everything we had saved. 35 years of savings, all completely gone. I felt like I'd been stabbed in the back and someone was just twisting the blade mercilessly, especially since the advisor at the investment company was someone I'd considered a friend and who I thought was looking out for my family's best interest. I was so furious I couldn't even see straight, and the only comfort I found was in the fact that the feds had hauled that so-called friend, along with all the other thieves he worked with, off to jail. It was the middle of winter, and the bills were stacking up fast as the freezing snow and wind belted our home. We sold our second car just to get some breathing room and put food on the table. I called my bank to try to take out a mortgage on our home, but because of the recession, our home was completely underwater and they had no interest. All of our hopes and dreams were totally crushed, and it seemed like no one was willing to help us. And as I watched my wife fall asleep crying each night, I couldn't help but feel utterly helpless. So I decided to do something. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew where I could start. We canceled our internet service to save money, and I took our laptop down to the coffee shop in the local mall to treat myself to a cup of joe and use the free internet. As I looked over our monthly budget sheet, I almost threw up at how much money we were shelling out to the power company each month just to keep the lights on and the heat going. I was already pissed having just lost my life savings, and now I'm faced with the fact that we're spending $220 and sometimes even closer to $300 on power every month. There had to be a way to reduce my dependence on the big energy companies and lower my monthly energy bill. The greenies never shut up about solar, so maybe that was a good alternative. I pounded away at my laptop, looking for local companies that did solar panels. And my eyes almost popped out of my head when I saw that price tag for one of these systems was around $10,000. Even the DIY solar panel systems I found were still too expensive for someone living 2 steps away from the poorhouse. What about wind power, I thought. I looked out the window and saw giant gusts of wind thrashing in the snow outside. Well, upon deeper research, it seemed like the saying, "fickle as the wind," was appropriate, as I read that the technology was still unreliable, not to mention that they looked hideous outside your home. Gas generators were another option I saw people talking about online. But having just filled up my gas tank, I knew that constantly running one of those generators would be expensive, not to mention so annoying and loud. I was starting to feel like a rat trapped in a corner trying desperately to find a way out. There had to be another way. Frustrated, I decided to take a break and walk around the mall, which is when I discovered the simple invention that would change my life forever. As I passed one of those novelty toy stores, I noticed a small crowd of people had gathered in front of one strange toy in particular. It looked like a very small, handheld Ferris wheel, about the diameter of a baseball. It was standing in place on a little circular base plate that could fit in the palm of your hand. This mini Ferris wheel was spinning furiously, powered by a single piston. But as I inspected it, I didn't see any space for batteries or a power cord coming from it. I asked the store employee who was holding it what was causing the wheel to spin. He blew my mind and everyone else's standing there when he said, "The heat from my hand." We all looked at each other confused. "I swear it's true," he said, almost pleading with us. "It's some kind of self-powered toy," he tried to explain. He set the wheel down on the display table, and sure enough, it slowly stopped spinning. I picked it up myself and set the base of it on my open palm. I gave the wheel a little spin, and in a couple of seconds it was back at it, whirling around and around, with no assistance from me or an electricity source whatsoever. And that was when lightning struck my brain. What if I could build a larger version of this heat-powered toy engine to power my home? I rushed back to my computer and spent the next few weeks researching this type of heated air toy. I plowed through article after article, website after website, devouring any and all information I could about self-sustaining engines. I was absolutely blown away that I had never heard of this incredible invention. The science behind why the toy worked was pretty simple. Air expands when you heat it up, which is why hot air rises to the top of your house. Toy engines like the one I'd seen use a heat source to heat up air inside of a chamber. The air then expands and pushes a piston in one direction away from the heat source. As the piston moves away, the air is cooled, which causes the piston to move back in the opposite direction. And the piston is attached to a wheel, which then starts to spin. Apparently, the scientific concepts behind how this engine worked had first been invented by someone in Scotland in the 1800s. But besides an experiment by Philips Electronics in the 1950s, where they apparently used the same scientific principles to create an engine of their own, before suddenly and inexplicably shelving their project, this type of self-sustaining energy generation had always remained hidden from the public. My idea was this: if I could get this heat-powered engine to spin a large enough wheel, then maybe I could use it like a generator to produce electricity to power my house. The only problem was that I had to keep a heat source next to the chamber, like the heat from your palm. And the engine designs I'd seen online were so small that they could be powered by a candle, but to power my entire home, I'd need a much larger heat source. Which is where I ran into problems. It didn't look like anyone had ever attempted to power their entire home with a heated air engine before, so I would be breaking new ground. I started with the most obvious heat sources I knew, gas and electricity. I thought about using some kind of electrical coil or a natural gas burner like a stovetop to power my engine. I crunched the numbers, and powering the engine would cost me just $20, way less than what I was paying right now to power my entire home. But that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to rely as little as possible on the thoughtless energy monopolies who were sucking away precious dollars from me and my wife every single month. So I had to find another way to provide free, unlimited, and clean heat to my air engine. I went back to the drawing board and kept sourcing online engineering journals and online discussion forums for ideas about heat sources. I chatted with off-grid folks, engineers, designers, and anyone else who would talk with me, and I kept coming up empty. I had been doing nothing but research heated air engines for almost 2 months, and I was starting to get really discouraged. But my breakthrough came once again at the local mall where I was sitting in the little coffee shop researching. I really enjoyed taking mini breaks to people watch other patrons in the coffee shop. And as I sat there taking a breather, I noticed a little old lady sitting by herself a few tables over from me, drinking some tea and reading the newspaper. Her eyesight must have been absolutely terrible because she was using a magnifying glass to read the newspaper print. For whatever reason, seeing that magnifying glass made me think back to when I was a kid. One of my favorite pastimes was to use a magnifying glass to focus the sun's rays into a tiny, super hot dot that could burn through leaves and even ants. I think the lady felt me staring at her, and she looked up and smiled. I smiled back, and that was when it hit me. I had just discovered all of the free, limitless, and totally pure heat energy I could ever use. Because if I could somehow use a magnifying glass to focus the sun's rays into my engine, then I could power it completely for free. Of course, I couldn't use a handheld magnifying glass because it would be too small. I discovered that what I would need was something called a parabolic lens, which is basically a giant curved mirror. This would reflect the sun's rays into a single point on my engine at a temperature of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I had never heard of one of these things and thought it would be really hard to find, but I was able to get one for free from my local junkyard. You can find one online for under $100. I now had everything I would need to set up this heated air engine to power my home using pure sunlight. Plus, I could still use natural gas to power the engine when it was dark or during bad weather. Or even run a tiny amount of electricity into the engine and have it amplify the amount of power I got from it by more than 20 times. So I put what little money we had left into setting up the very first prototype of what my wife and I had started calling our Magnifier Engine.